Okay, let's just transport ourselves for a moment. Not to a generic kitchen, but to a very specific moment in time.
Right.
We're in the Ottoman Empire. It's the holy month of Ramadan. The sun has just set. The call to prayer has sounded, and the fast is broken.
And that's a moment of, well, intense relief, but also physical calibration. You've gone all day without food, without water. Your body craves energy, but it also really craves hydration.
Exactly. And that very specific need is what sets the stage for the document we are deep diving into today.
Hmm.
We're looking at a text titled Ottoman-Style Güllaç Tarifi, which is the Ottoman-style goulash recipe. And this isn't just a how-to guide. It's basically a cultural artifact.
It really is. The source frames this dish not just as food, but as a staple of the iftar table. It calls it one of the most preferred desserts for that specific post-fasting window.
Right.
And honestly, when you look at the chemistry of what's in here, it makes perfect sense why this dish was so popular for centuries.
The source uses two very specific words right at the start that really stuck with me. It describes the dessert as zarif and lazzetli.
Elegant and delicious.
Elegant and delicious. Delicious, I get. We all want our dessert to be delicious. But elegant, that feels like a heavy word for what is essentially a bowl of milky starch.
It is. And that word elegant, that's going to be our North Star for this whole conversation, because you look at the ingredients list in the text and nothing screams luxury, in the modern sense.
No gold leaf, no rare saffron.
Exactly. No imported chocolate. It's milk, sugar, starch, nuts.
So our mission today is to figure out how those humble ingredients come together to earn that title. Let's start with the foundation. The source lists the primary component right at the top. 10 pieces of guas leaves.
The Güllaç Sheets, yeah. The leaf.
The leaves?
Now, for anyone who hasn't seen these, we need to be clear what we're talking about. The text gives us clues in how to handle them. These aren't like, say, phyllo dough, which is soft and pliable.
No, the instructions are all about rehydration, which implies they're dry. Brittle, almost, like paper.
Think of them as dried starch lattices. Historically, they're made from cornstarch and water, poured onto a hot surface, and dried almost instantly, so they are incredibly fragile.
A doily made of batter.
That's a great way to put it. They are completely devoid of moisture.
Which brings us to what the text calls the liquid gold of the recipe.
The milk mixture.
Yeah, the source dictates a very specific bathing ritual for these dry sheets. We have a ratio here. 1 liter of milk to 1 cup of granulated sugar.
And let's just pause on that ratio for a second. 1 liter of milk is a lot of liquid for a dessert. That tells you immediately we are not baking a cake here.
We're creating a suspension.
We're creating a medium for those dry starch sheets to live in.
And the instructions for the milk are interesting. The text says to heat the milk in a pot and stir until the sugar melts. It specifically stops short of saying boil.
That is a crucial distinction. If you boil milk, you change its protein structure. You get that skin on top, the flavor changes.
That cooked milk taste.
Exactly. A little scorched. The source just wants us to dissolve the sugar. We want a smooth, sweet cream. It needs to be warm enough to penetrate the sheets, but not so hot that it turns them into mush right away.
So we have this warm, sweet milk bath. But if we stopped there, it would just be sweet milk. This is where the source adds the Ottoman fingerprint. It calls for 1 dessert spoon of rosewater.
Ah, the gusuyu. This is where the elegance comes in.
I have to be honest, when I see rosewater in a recipe, I get a little skeptical. It's such a distinct flavor. For a modern palate, used to vanilla or chocolate, it can feel,
Yeah.
well, like eating perfume.
I hear that a lot. But you have to look at it through the lens of the Ottoman palate and, frankly, the physiology of eating.
Okay.
Remember, this is eaten after a heavy meal. Dairy is rich. It coats your tongue. Sugar is heavy. If you just had sweet milk, it would be cloying. It would weigh you down.
So the rosewater is a counterbalance.
Precisely. Floral flavors provide a high note. It cuts through that creamy, fatty coating on your tongue, and it lifts the entire profile. That 1 little dessert spoon isn't just for smell. It's a palate cleanser built right into the dessert.
It's what separates a simple pudding from a dish suitable for the palace.
It transforms it. And the source is very specific about adding it after the milk is heated. You don't cook the rosewater. You want those volatile aromatics to stay fresh.
Okay, so we have our warm rose-scented milk and our stack of brittle starch sheets. Now we move to the preparation stages, the hazırlık aşamaları. This feels more like a craft project than cooking.
It's an architectural process. The text describes a ritual of wetting the güllaç leaf.
Walk us through the sensory experience of this. The text just says, place 1 leaf in a tray, pour the warm milk over it, Repeat.
Okay, so imagine the sound first. You take this dry, crackly sheet. It literally crunches if you hold it too tight, and you lay it in the tray. Then you pour that warm milk. You'd probably hear a little hiss, a crackle, as the dry starch meets the liquid. You're watching the sheet go from opaque white to translucent. It relaxes into the tray.
And you do this 10 times. It's very repetitive.
It's meditative, and you're building a structure. You aren't just making a mush, you're laminating layers of starch and cream. But the text tells us not to just stack them endlessly. We need an interruption.
The nuts. Half a cup of crushed walnuts or hazelnuts.
The crunch factor.
The source suggests sprinkling this on every layer, or at least in the middle. Why is that textural contrast so important?
Because our brains get bored easily. It's something called sensory-specific satiety. If you eat something that's entirely soft and uniform, your brain just stops registering the pleasure after a few bites.
It becomes monotonous.
Exactly. So by introducing crushed walnuts, and the text says crushed, not whole, so you get these jagged little bits, you're constantly reawakening the palate.
Soft, creamy. Crunchies.
Yep.
Keeps you engaged. And walnuts or hazelnuts are traditional because they have tannins, a slight bitterness that, again, balances out that entire cup of sugar.
So we've built this lasagna of milk and starch. We've used our 10 leaves, our liter of milk, our nuts. The tray is full. It smells amazing. I'm ready to dig in.
And this is where the source breaks your heart.
The cooling and service section.
The dreaded wait.
Keep in the refrigerator for one night. One whole night.
This is the hardest instruction to follow, but it's arguably the most scientifically important one in the entire text.
Why? What is actually happening in that fridge overnight? Why can't I just eat it when it cools down in an hour?
It's all about the starch.
Yeah.
You cut into it right away. You just have wet sheets floating around in milk.
Oh, okay.
The magic happens during that long, slow, cold soak. It's about osmosis and gelatinization. Over those 8 to 12 hours, the starch in the leaves swells up. It drinks that milk.
It's like marinating. In a way, yeah. The liquid and the starch create a gel structure. So when you wake up the next morning, it's not milk and leaves anymore. It has unified. It's a single, cohesive entity. You can cut a square, and it holds its shape.
So it actually becomes a cake.
A cake made of milk. Without that weight, you're just eating soup. With the weight, you're eating goulash.
And the temperature is key here too, right? The source emphasizes serving it cold.
Crucially, go back to our intro. In Ramadan, it's probably a warm evening. You're dehydrated.
Right.
A hot dessert might be comforting in the winter, but after fasting, your body wants that temperature contrast. Cold milk is incredibly refreshing. It feels hydrating. It cools you down.
So the elegance isn't just the flavor, it's the physical sensation of it.
It is. It's designed to soothe.
Okay, fast forward. It's the next day. We have waited. We open the fridge. We have this beautiful white solidified dessert. But it does look a little plain.
It's very monochromatic, white on white, maybe a little beige from the walnuts peeking through. Visually, it's a bit of a ghost.
And this is where the final step comes in. The garnish. The source lists pomegranate seeds, nartanellari. It notes they are optional, but let's be real, are they really?
Not if you want the Ottoman-style experience, no. They are essential, and not just for the look, although the look is stunning.
It's the color contrast, isn't it? That bright ruby red against the snow white.
It's jewel-toned. It immediately signals special occasion. But think deeper than just the look. Think about the flavor of a pomegranate seed.
It's tart. It pops in your mouth.
It's an acid bomb.
Yeah.
Exactly. We spent all this time building a dessert of fat, sugar, and starch. It's soft, creamy, sweet.
One note, almost.
It can be. But when you bite into a pomegranate seed, you get that explosion of tart acidity. It cuts right through the fat.
And the texture's totally different.
A wet crunch. It's completely different from the soft leaf or the crunchy nut.
So that optional ingredient is actually the final pillar holding the whole flavor profile up.
I would absolutely argue yes. Without it, you have a very good milk pudding. With it, you have zarif. You have elegance. You have complexity.
The source wraps up with a really interesting cultural note. It links goulash to sarı sütlaç, palace rice pudding.
Yes, it groups them together. It says they are both elegant and delicious desserts of the Ottoman Empire that cheer up the tables.
Cheer up the tables. I love that phrasing. Sofrayı şenlendirir. It implies the food has a job to do. Its job is to bring joy.
It does, and by linking it to the palace, the saray, the text is doing something very specific. It's democratizing luxury.
How so?
Well, think about it. The Sultan is eating this, but the ingredients, milk, rosewater, starch, nuts, these were accessible to regular people too. By following this Ottoman-style recipe, you're inviting the palace into your own home.
You're participating in a high-culture ritual with everyday ingredients.
Exactly. It's not about how much money you spent, it's about the care you took. The patience to heat the milk gently, to layer one by one.
The patience to wait overnight.
That is the Ottoman aesthetic right there. Refinement through patience. It proves you don't need complexity to be sophisticated. You just need to understand your materials.
So let's zoom out. We've gone from dry, brittle sheets of starch to this wobbly, rose-scented, cold masterpiece.
Yeah.
What's the big takeaway for our listener who might never have even tasted this?
I think the takeaway is about the power of transformation. We took things that are dry and hard and things that are liquid, and with nothing but temperature and time, we created a new state of matter.
And we learned that elegance isn't about adding more, it's about balance.
Right. It's the rose against the milk, the acid of the pomegranate against the sugar, the crunch of the nut against the soft leaf. It's a masterclass in culinary engineering.
And it forces you to slow down. You can't rush goulash. In a world of instant gratification, this is a dessert that demands you wait.
And the reward for that wait is a bite that really does capture the history of an entire empire.
Before we let you go, I want to leave you with one thought to chew on. We talked about the pomegranate being optional.
Right.
But imagine this dish without it. Just imagine serving a bowl of plain white milk cake. It tastes good, sure, but does it feel elegant?
It feels safe.
Exactly, it feels safe. The elegance comes from the risk of that acid, from that stark visual contrast. So for you listening, next time you are cooking or even just eating, ask yourself, what is the pomegranate seed in this experience? What's that one small element that changes the context from just sustenance into art?
That's a great question. Usually it's the thing that provides the tension.
The tension makes the story, and the tension makes the dessert. Thanks for taking this trip to the Ottoman kitchen with us.
It was a pleasure. I'm craving rosewater now.
Are we all? We'll catch you on the next deep dive. Until then, stay curious. And maybe check your fridge.